When we talk about an Internet of Things, it's about embedding intelligence so things become smarter and do more than they were proposed to do. That is such an incredibly optimistic vision from tech pioneer Nicholas Negroponte. He's really painting this picture of a seamless future, right? One where our everyday objects just sort of anticipate what we need. But it really makes you wonder, what actually happens when the intelligence embedded in our walls, our household appliances, and our networks starts to outpace our own ability to secure them?
Well, our source material today presents a pretty provocative counterargument to that sunny outlook. Researchers Stylianos Vidalis and Olga Angelopoulou, they argue that as we hand over all this heavy lifting of intelligence to our smart devices, we humans have inadvertently surrendered our own agency. Basically, in a world full of incredibly smart devices, we've kind of become nothing more than the dumb members of the Internet of Things.
So, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to go on a really fascinating journey exploring the massive scale of cyber vulnerability. We'll be diving into the research and enterprise strategies to figure out exactly how attacks escalate. We're talking everything from basic psychological tricks played on individual people, all the way up to the massive, complex defense structures that global corporations have to use. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this material today. Here's a quick look at how we'll break this down. First, theft versus fraud. Then, exploiting human psychology. Next, smart devices and invisible threats. After that, assessing attacker complexity. And finally, enterprise identity management.
Okay, part 1. Theft versus fraud. Defining the crime. Because really, before we can even begin to understand the defense, we have to precisely define what is actually happening.
So, people mix these up all the time, but there is a fundamental separation between these two terms. According to our sources, identity theft is purely the data acquisition phase. It's just stealing the data, the names, the passwords, the bank details. But from a legal and forensic standpoint, the theft alone isn't always the actual crime. Identity fraud is the execution phase. That's the subsequent criminal act where the stolen identity is actively used to acquire goods or services or maybe evade the law.
And the thing to remember is, identity theft is literally never just a single, isolated event. It is a highly methodical process. The attack chain happens in 4 distinct steps. It kicks off with information collection, which is usually just gathering really small pieces of data. Then comes victim manipulation, which leverages social engineering. Step 3 is the actual credential theft. And finally, step 4 is the fraud execution for financial gain. If you want to stop the fraud, you absolutely have to break this chain somewhere.
Which brings us to part 2. Exploiting human psychology, hacking the mind. Because to successfully execute step 2 of that attack chain, the victim manipulation, attackers usually don't even need to break through a firewall. They literally just need to hack the human mind. Social engineering requires absolutely zero technical skills. Zero. Attackers exploit human behavior by pulling on some very specific psychological triggers. They might create a false sense of urgency. I mean, we've all seen those "your account will be suspended immediately" emails, right? They induce fear. They'll impersonate trusted brands to exploit our trust, or maybe pretend to be your boss to leverage authority. And they do this simply because humans react emotionally, not logically. And this leads us to a pretty terrifying evolution in these attacks: phishing versus pharming. Now, phishing relies on you, the user, making a mistake, like trusting a bad link in a fake email. But pharming requires no email and absolutely no user interaction. It happens invisibly, right at the network level through DNS hijacking or cache poisoning. You could type in the completely correct, legitimate web address, but the system silently redirects you to a malicious, visually identical site. It is entirely invisible, which means even highly security-aware users can easily become victims. But whether they're using phishing or pharming, attackers are really playing the long game through a concept called data aggregation. Think of this kind of like building a giant jigsaw puzzle. An attacker doesn't actually need your entire profile all at once. They can just grab small, seemingly harmless pieces of data that get leaked over time, maybe a date of birth here, a partial address there, and aggregate them into a devastatingly complete identity profile. Tiny data leaks lead to a massive impact.
Let's move into part 3. Smart devices, invisible threats, the IoT frontier. We need to look at how this threat of data aggregation completely skyrockets when we introduce the Internet of Things. Because as we bring smart devices into our homes, we are inadvertently introducing totally new technical vulnerabilities. One incredibly fascinating method detailed in our academic source is the salami attack. It's exactly what it sounds like. Just like slicing a salami paper thin, an attacker sniffs and modifies network packets in tiny, unnoticeable slices. They steal your data bit by bit, making sure they never actually disrupt the availability of your network. And because the network keeps working perfectly fine, the victim suspects absolutely nothing until a major breach has already occurred.
Let me walk you through a specific and frankly terrifying scenario straight from the research. Picture this. First, the attacker quietly maps the IP addresses of your home network. Then, you innocently open an app just to check the inventory of your smart fridge. The attacker sees this active session and hijacks it. Your app freezes. Assuming it's just a standard annoying network glitch, you reboot your system, figuring everything is fine. But in that brief little window of chaos, the attacker silently installs rootkits and backdoors. Your entire home network is now compromised. And it all started just because you wanted to check what was in the fridge.
Section 4. Assessing attacker complexity. Who is hacking you? I mean, if our fridges and home networks are getting hijacked, we really need to ask who exactly is carrying out these attacks.
So researchers actually use a vulnerability assessment model to calculate the educational complexity of an attacker. Because, not all threats are created equal. Down at level 5, you've got the script kiddie. This is someone with pretty basic programming and internet skills who just uses pre-written tools to cause trouble. But move up to level 9, and now you're facing an expert hacker who has advanced networking, scripting, and operating system knowledge. And at level A, you are dealing with a professional hacker, a highly educated known entity capable of devastating, highly targeted intrusions. The level of defense absolutely has to match the complexity of the attacker.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Enterprise Identity Management, Systemic Defense. Because how do massive organizations with thousands of employees defend their networks against this incredible scale of vulnerability?
To really understand corporate IT, we have to look at the sheer chaos of unmanaged user access, which is documented here by BMC Software. Just imagine the nightmare for a second. An exhausted IT worker spending a third of their entire day just resetting people's passwords. Or a new hire waiting 2 full weeks just to get basic access to the company's systems. And then, the most dangerous one, an employee who was terminated 4 months ago, but whose account was never actually deactivated, and they are currently pulling all your customer data from the CRM system. This is exactly what happens when identity isn't managed systemically.
So to fix this utter chaos, enterprises rely on massive, centralized structures like identity management suites. You literally cannot just track passwords on a spreadsheet anymore. You need a unified business process workflow that handles directory management to keep track of people, access management to enforce privileges, automated user provisioning, password management for self-service resets, and critically, audit and compliance management to enforce policy. You have to centralize, optimize, and automate the whole shebang.
Now, what's really interesting here is why the top executives actually care about this. The corporate drivers aren't just about stopping some random hacker. The CFO and CEO care because they have to enforce internal standards, reduce those massive IT operational costs, and above all else, comply with incredibly strict global regulations. We're talking about heavy mandates like the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or SOX, and Basel II. Failing to manage identity and access can literally mean millions of dollars in regulatory fines. So compliance becomes a top business imperative, not just a problem for the IT guys. And this brings us to how they actually monitor it all. Continuous compliance dashboards. These interfaces track real-time compliance across an entire global organization. They visually flag dangerous things like ghost accounts, those terminated employees still lurking in the system that we mentioned earlier. They monitor excessive administrator rights, and they ensure the separation of duties, making sure no single user has enough power to commit fraud undetected. It is essentially constant automated surveillance of the network's own users.
But across all our sources today, one truth remains absolutely undeniable. The human user is always the most easily exploited vulnerability. No matter how advanced that corporate dashboard is, or how strong your home firewall might be, social engineering just bypasses it all. So I'm going to leave you with this question. Despite all the multi-million-dollar technology in the world right now, are you the weakest link in your own network? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions and stay curious.